It started with a cardboard box, a cracked phone screen, and a nervous heartbeat. I had just stepped into my new dorm room, a small, sunlit space that smelled like pine cleaner and cheap carpet. This was supposed to be the beginning of something simple. College. Independence. A clean slate. What I didn't expect was him. He stood there by the window, unpacking a pair of sneakers and humming softly to himself. Light brown hair, lean build, confident posture, the kind of guy you'd expect to see front and center on a college football poster. He turned around, flashed a smile that could stop traffic, and said, "Hey, you must be my new roomie. I'm Jake." Jake. His name felt too casual for how fast my chest clenched when I heard it. I mumbled my own name, trying not to sound like I was already breathless. We shook hands, his grip was warm, firm, and he gestured toward the other bed. "That side's all yours, man." I didn't touch anything. We spent that first hour in polite small talk. Classes. Hometowns. Favorite music. I learned that he had a girlfriend back home, a long-distance thing. I laughed more than I normally do, partly because he was funny, but mostly because I didn't want to seem awkward. By the second night, something started changing. Not big things. Tiny ones. The way he said goodnight, low and soft, like it actually mattered. The way he walked around shirtless without even noticing how comfortable he was in his own skin. I started noticing everything. At first, I thought it was admiration. He was the kind of guy I'd never let myself be growing up. Outgoing, effortless, straight. But the more time we spent together, the more those thoughts crept in, quiet and unwelcome. I would lie awake at night, pretending to scroll through my phone, stealing glances as he lay in bed across from me, one arm thrown over his eyes, his chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. And something in me would stir. I tried to push it down. I told myself I was just lonely. That I missed the comfort of being understood, of having someone around who got me. Jake didn't know I was gay. I hadn't told anyone here yet. It wasn't shame. Not exactly. Just a kind of fear that hadn't left me since high school. A habit of hiding. One night, we ended up staying up late, talking. It was quiet outside, just the occasional laughter from the hallway. We sat on our beds, both too lazy to move, and he asked about my last relationship. I froze. I wanted to lie, but I didn't. I told him the truth. That it didn't end well. That it was a guy. He blinked, paused, and then said, "Oh. Cool." Just like that. No awkwardness, no change in tone. I waited for something, maybe a shift in the air, maybe a new wall between us. But it never came. "Thanks for telling me," he said, and rolled onto his side, like it was the most normal thing in the world. After that night, something shifted again. But this time, it wasn't just inside me. It was in the way he started making little jokes about dating apps. The way he'd nudge me in the arm and say, "He's cute, right?" When we walked past someone on campus. I couldn't tell if he was trying to make me comfortable or if he was just that open. Still, every time he leaned too close, I froze inside. Every time he brushed past me or clapped a hand on my back, my skin burned. He didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't say a word. And I hated myself a little more for feeling the way I did. He was kind, gentle in ways I didn't expect. He didn't make gay jokes, didn't flinch when I mentioned something personal. But he also didn't know what he was doing to me. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't know what it meant. Either way, I was falling. Quietly, secretly, hopelessly. And he had no idea. The days started to blur together after that. We got into a rhythm, classes in the morning, meals together when our schedules lined up, and late nights filled with random conversations and dumb TV shows we didn't even like. Jake had this way of making even silence feel comfortable. He'd throw a pillow at me from across the room when he got bored, or suddenly start talking about a memory from high school like we'd known each other forever. We weren't just roommates anymore. We were friends. Some nights, we'd both stay up long after midnight, the room lit only by the glow of his laptop. He liked watching documentaries, and I pretended to care about them just so I could stay up with him. We didn't say much during those nights. Sometimes I'd hear him laugh softly at something on the screen, and that sound would stay in my head until morning. One night, he fell asleep on my bed. We'd both been sitting there scrolling through TikTok, laughing at stupid videos, and at some point he just lay back and closed his eyes. I froze, my heart beating so loud it drowned out everything else. He didn't move when I sat beside him. Didn't flinch when our legs touched. I didn't dare breathe too loud. I stared at the ceiling, trying to will myself not to feel anything. But the warmth of his body next to mine, the steady rhythm of his breathing, it was too much. Too confusing. I thought about how easy it would be to fall into that moment, to lean my head on his shoulder. I didn't, of course. I got up, walked to the other side of the room, and curled up in my own bed, silently cursing the part of me that wanted more. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened. Made a joke about hogging my bed and stole a piece of my toast like he always did. I laughed it off, but something in me twisted. He didn't feel it. Whatever it was that kept me awake last night, he didn't feel it. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't know how to say it. There were other moments. Quick, passing ones that stayed with me too long. Like the time we were playing a stupid drinking game at a party and he dared me to kiss someone in the room. I hesitated, scanning the group of mostly strangers. Then he leaned in and whispered, "Pick whoever you want. No judgment here." I looked at him for half a second too long. He smirked, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. I chickened out, choosing to drink instead. Everyone laughed, and the game moved on. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way he looked at me in that moment, like he was waiting to see if I'd actually do it. I started questioning everything. Was he just comfortable in his skin, or was there something more behind those glances? Was I imagining it all because I wanted it so badly? One afternoon, we were walking back from class and it started pouring rain out of nowhere. We sprinted across the lawn, soaked in seconds. By the time we reached our dorm, we were both out of breath and dripping wet. I started to grab a towel when he pulled his shirt off without a second thought. His skin glistened, water dripping down his chest, and I had to look away before I lost control of my face. "You good?" he asked, catching me staring. I laughed too quickly. "Yeah, just cold." He nodded, rubbing his arms. "You can borrow one of my hoodies if you want." I said no, but the offer lingered. Kind, thoughtful, innocent, maybe. But to me, every gesture felt loaded, even if it wasn't meant to be. I hated that I was reading too much into things. I hated that I couldn't just turn it off. And through it all, he never gave me a reason to back away. He never said or did anything to push me away. But that was the problem, he never gave me anything clear either. I started avoiding his eyes sometimes, afraid he'd see too much. I stopped talking late at night, pretending to be tired. But he noticed. "You okay?" he asked one night, when I barely spoke during dinner. "Just tired," I lied. He didn't push, just nodded and gave me a quiet look that said he didn't believe me. I kept telling myself it would pass. That I'd get over it like a harmless crush. But every day I spent with him, the feeling grew heavier. I wasn't falling anymore. I had already fallen. It was supposed to be just another weekend party. Loud music, too many bodies crammed into a small house, red Solo cups everywhere. Jake convinced me to go, like he always did. Said I needed to get out more, meet people, live a little. I agreed, even though I knew I wasn't really going for the party. I just wanted to be around him. We got there late. He disappeared into a crowd of friends from his psych class while I hovered in the kitchen, pretending to text someone. I didn't know many people. I never really did. But I caught glimpses of him through the crowd, his head thrown back in laughter, the way he slapped someone's shoulder when he joked, how his smile made people want to stay close to him. I watched from a distance, like I always did. An hour passed. Maybe two. I drank just enough to feel the edge of calm without completely losing myself. At some point, Jake found me again. He grinned, his cheeks slightly flushed, and leaned in close. "You good?" "Yeah," I nodded, even though I wasn't. "You buzzed," he laughed. "Come with me." He pulled me through the crowd without waiting for an answer. We ended up in a quiet room upstairs, someone's bedroom, probably. The door clicked shut behind us, muffling the music. I looked around, unsure why we were there, but he just sat on the edge of the bed and patted the spot beside him. "I needed a break," he said, stretching his arms behind him. "Too many people." I sat down, trying to ignore how close we were. Our knees brushed. He didn't move. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. Then he asked, "Do you ever wonder why things feel easier with some people?" I turned to look at him. His voice had dropped, softer than usual. What do you mean? I don't know. Like, it's easy with you. Being around you. He rubbed the back of his neck. I don't have to explain myself. My heart thudded. I feel the same. He looked at me, really looked at me, and something changed in his expression. Something quieter, more vulnerable. He leaned back against the headboard, eyes never leaving mine. I've been thinking about that night, he said. My throat tightened. Which night? When you told me about your ex. I nodded slowly. What about it? I don't know. You were just honest. And I realized I don't really have anyone I can be like that with. He looked down at his hands. Sometimes I feel things and I don't even know what to call them. I didn't know what he meant exactly, but I felt it too, those unnamed emotions that crept in when he smiled at me, when he shared too much, when he didn't know how deeply he affected me. I whispered, me too. We sat in the quiet that followed, heavy with something unsaid. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached out and touched my hand. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't casual. His fingers just rested there, warm and trembling against mine. He looked at me, and I looked back, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. And then, before I could stop myself, I leaned in. It wasn't a kiss that happened fast. It was hesitant, unsure. Our lips barely touched, more of a question than an answer. But it happened. And for a moment, time slowed. The noise from the party faded. Everything felt still. When I pulled back, his eyes were wide. He looked stunned, like even he didn't know what he'd just done. I shouldn't have, I started, but he stood up suddenly. No, it's fine, he said quickly, avoiding my eyes. I need a minute. Before I could say anything else, he was gone. The door opened, then shut again, leaving me sitting on the bed, heart racing, ears ringing. I sat there for what felt like hours. The air in the room felt colder without him. I kept replaying it in my head, his hand, the kiss, the look on his face. Had I just ruined everything? When I finally made my way home, our room was dark. He was already in bed, turned away from me, pretending to be asleep. I didn't say anything. I just crawled into my own bed and stared at the ceiling. The silence between us was louder than anything I'd ever heard. The silence lasted longer than I expected. Days passed, and everything changed. Not in a loud or obvious way, but in the quiet spaces where we used to talk, laugh, just be. Now, there were pauses too long to ignore. Jake didn't avoid me exactly. He still said good morning, still offered me gum before class, still handed me the remote like always, but the warmth was missing. Something invisible had settled between us, something neither of us knew how to touch. He didn't bring up that night. Not the kiss. Not the way he looked at me right before he left. I wanted to pretend it never happened too, just to get things back to the way they were. But I couldn't. Every time I looked at him, I remembered the way his fingers had felt in mine, the confusion in his eyes, the way his lips barely met mine like he wasn't sure if it was real. I stopped sleeping. Not really from fear, just from the constant loop of questions I couldn't shut off. Had I crossed a line? Did he hate me now? Did he hate himself? Or was it just fear? Maybe his, maybe mine. By the fourth day, I couldn't take it anymore. I found him on the quad after class, sitting under a tree with his earbuds in. I walked up, stood in front of him until he noticed. He looked up slowly, took out one earbud, and waited. We need to talk, I said. He nodded, but his face was guarded. We walked in silence back to the dorm room. When we got inside, I closed the door behind us, and for the first time in days, I made myself look straight at him. I'm sorry, I said. He looked confused. For what? For what happened that night? He sat on the edge of his bed, leaned forward, hands clasped. Why are you apologizing? Because you looked scared. Like I did something wrong. He shook his head. You didn't do anything wrong. I didn't expect that. I sat down across from him, knees almost touching. He looked up at me, finally meeting my eyes. I was the one who touched your hand first, he said. I didn't think about it. It just felt right. And when you leaned in, I didn't stop you. Then why'd you leave? He exhaled, like the weight of the question had been sitting on his chest all week. Because I panicked, he said. Because I didn't understand what I was feeling. I still don't. I didn't say anything. I wanted to give him the space to speak freely, no pressure, no judgment. So I waited. He looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. I've never thought of myself as anything but straight. I've had girlfriends. I still like girls. But that night, with you, something felt different. And I didn't know what to do with that. I swallowed hard. So what now? I don't know, he admitted. I don't know what it means. I don't know if I like you that way or if I just needed someone to make me feel something real for once. That's not fair to me, I said quietly. He nodded. I know. And I'm not trying to mess with you. I swear I'm not. But I can't pretend it didn't happen. I felt something. I don't know what it is, but it's not nothing. We sat in the heavy silence that followed. But this time, it didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like two people trying to figure out what to do with the truth they'd uncovered. He rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe I need space. Not because I don't want you around, but because I need to sort this out. Okay, I said, even though it hurt. I get it. He looked up again. I just don't want to lose you. You won't, I said. But I need to protect myself too. I can't keep wondering every day what I mean to you. He nodded again, this time slower, like he really understood. I think we both need time, I said. To figure out who we are. What we feel. Yeah, he said. That makes sense. It wasn't closure. Not really. But it was something close to honesty. And for now, that was enough. We didn't talk much that night. I put in my headphones. He went to sleep early. But something was different in the air, less tension, more acceptance. We had finally said the things we were too scared to admit. Now came the harder part. The space, the waiting, the figuring out. The space between us grew in small ways at first. He spent more time at the gym or in the library, came back late, and left early. I stopped asking where he was going. I buried myself in classes, assignments, and anything that kept my mind from circling back to him. The quiet wasn't cold anymore, it was just there, something we both silently agreed to. No anger, no drama. Just distance. For the first time since we met, I had to learn how to exist without orbiting around him. I didn't realize how much I'd shaped my routine around his presence, when I woke up, what I ate, when I left for class, who I talked to. Without Jake, my world felt quieter, slower, but not in the worst way. It was like waking up from a long dream. I started spending more time with other people, people I hadn't noticed before because I'd been so wrapped up in him. There was a girl in my philosophy class who invited me to a queer student meeting. I almost said no. I didn't feel ready. But something inside me knew I needed it. So I went. It wasn't what I expected. No forced smiles, no trying to prove anything. Just people talking, laughing, telling stories I thought only lived inside my head. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain who I was or why I felt too much. I didn't have to carry the weight of what happened with Jake like it was some shameful secret. I just talked. I made friends. Real ones. People who texted me just to ask how I was doing. People who didn't see me as just the quiet guy in the corner. I started to feel like someone more than just a reflection of Jake's shadow. I even went on a few dates. Nothing serious, but enough to remind me that I was worthy of being wanted. One guy, Mark, was sweet and straightforward. No mixed signals, no blurred lines. He kissed me after our second coffee, and I didn't feel nervous, I just felt seen. It wasn't fireworks, but it was real. Honest. Still, Jake was never far from my mind. Weeks passed. We barely spoke, but when we did, it was polite. Civil. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he had the right anymore. I never asked. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. But then one evening, out of nowhere, he asked if I wanted to grab dinner. It caught me off guard. I almost said no, but something in his voice was different, soft, hesitant. So I said yes. We ended up at this quiet diner off campus, sitting across from each other in a corner booth. It felt strange and familiar all at once. We ordered food, made small talk, laughed a little. But I could feel the weight building between us. After a long pause, he looked at me and said, "I've been going to therapy." I blinked. Really? Yeah, he nodded. Just to understand myself. My past. Everything. That's good, I said. Seriously. I'm proud of you. He smiled, but it faded quickly. I've also been thinking a lot about you. I stayed quiet. I was scared, he said. Not just of what I felt that night, but of what it meant for who I thought I was. I've always lived a certain way, followed certain rules. But you, being around you, made me feel things that didn't fit in that box. My chest tightened, but I didn't say anything yet. I still don't have it all figured out, he admitted. But I know that night wasn't a mistake. I know I cared about you. Maybe I still do. My hands shook under the table, but I kept my face steady. What do you want from me, Jake? He looked down, then back at me. A chance to try. Not to jump into anything. Just to talk again. Like before. Only this time, with everything on the table. I took a deep breath. I didn't know what I was feeling. Part of me wanted to grab his hand, rewind everything, start over. But another part of me had changed. I had built something without him. I wasn't the same person who used to lose sleep over what his smile meant. I don't know what's going to happen, I said carefully. But we can talk. One step at a time. He nodded, eyes soft. That's all I'm asking for. That night, we walked back slowly, not touching, not rushing. Just walking side by side like we had on that first day, only now with a shared history between us, messy, real, unfinished. The space hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. Now, it felt like the space we both needed to heal. And maybe, just maybe, something new could grow from it. A week later, he knocked on my door instead of just walking in like he used to. That simple gesture said more than any apology could. We were learning to be careful with each other again, not out of fear, but out of respect for what had happened between us, for everything unspoken that we were finally starting to say out loud. He sat down on the edge of my bed like he belonged there, but this time he waited for me to invite him into the conversation. I've been thinking a lot, he said. About the way I've acted. About what I felt. What I still feel. I listened, watching the way his eyes flickered when he talked, how his voice trembled just slightly. He wasn't pretending anymore. He wasn't performing or trying to be someone else. He was just Jake. Vulnerable. Honest. Finally real. I was scared of what it would mean if I let myself feel anything for you, he continued. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I didn't know how to explain it to anyone. Not even myself. He looked up at me. But I'm done hiding. I didn't rush to respond. I let the silence hang for a moment, because I wasn't the same person he kissed in that room upstairs weeks ago. I had learned how to stand alone since then. How to find worth without needing it from someone else. But I also knew that the way I had felt about him hadn't disappeared. I can't promise anything, I said quietly. I've been hurt. I've healed a little. I still have more healing to do. But I'm willing to try. If you are. Jake nodded. I don't expect you to fix this. I just don't want to walk away from it without trying. So we started slow. No labels, no expectations. Just long talks, shared dinners, walks around campus where we talked about everything except the future. We were rebuilding, not the way things had been, but something different. Something stronger. He began showing up in ways that were quiet but meaningful. A note left on my desk. A playlist he made for late-night studying. He listened more, asked questions he didn't before. And for the first time, I saw someone who wasn't just figuring out how to care about me, but how to care for himself too. We never made some big announcement. We didn't define it with rules. But one night, as we sat on the dorm balcony, the stars faint above the city lights, he reached for my hand. Not out of confusion this time. Not with hesitation, but with calm, clear certainty. And I didn't pull away. It wasn't the story I thought I'd be telling when I first moved into that dorm. I didn't expect to fall for someone who was still learning what love looked like. But sometimes the best stories aren't the ones that start with clarity, they're the ones that grow in the middle of confusion, where two people are brave enough to stand in the gray. Love, in the end, didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be real. And for the first time, I felt like it was. If this story meant something to you, or if you've ever been caught between feelings you couldn't explain, don't keep it to yourself. Share your story. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if you're still figuring things out like we are, that's okay too. Hit the like button, subscribe for more human stories like this, and drop a comment if you've ever loved someone who surprised you. You're not alone. We're all just learning.